Hello and good evening, everyone. Kyle Ryman here for Soaring Weather, here to give you your live update for the 2020 Atlantic hurricane season. I'm going to be bringing you all the mid-September live update on the rest of the season, going over what we've seen so far from the season and from the last update we did back in August, and then also recapping things for the next few months of the Atlantic hurricane season and giving a little bit of a forecast as to what we're going to be seeing for the future. So quick notes before I actually start my live update. You may have noticed that I do not have my camera up and running on the live stream, and that is because I'm currently on another device streaming the what's on my screen right now and all of the audio and video into my laptop that is also streaming to Facebook at the moment. So I'm working on two devices as of right now, and that's going to solve the clipping that I've been having with these live streams for now until the future. Another thing, the reason why I don't have a webcam set up is because I just been having difficulties with my phone to desktop tower software that allows me to use my phone camera to stream the camera from the phone onto my computer, and it's not really working, and I thought it would be a little too distracting for the live update, so we're just going to not use the camera for tonight's live stream. Other than that, we'll get right started with the live update. I'm going to transition into the full screen so you can see the whole slides that I've prepared for you all tonight for the mid-September live update. So, just to recap what we've seen so far, it's been quite the historic season so far. And as we take a look at what has occurred over the past few weeks from the last live update we did, and recapping the whole season overall thus far. Again, this is our sixth consecutive year with a named storm before the official start of the season, with tropical storms Arthur and Bertha, and that was the first time since 2006 there were two or more named storms that developed before the start of the season, and also the first time since 2012 that two or more named storms formed in the month of May alone, and that ties the record for most named storms in May with 2012 and 1887. And then going down the list of records that have been broken so far this year with this hurricane season, record earliest 3rd, 5th through 23rd named storms have been broken. And most of those were from the 2005 hurricane season, especially from the 5th name to the 23rd named storm. So we're talking about Cristobal and Edward and all of the names up until this point, which is the current name Beta. We've gone into the Greek alphabet since we have exhausted the names from the name list for this year's hurricane season, and this is actually the second time that name list has been exhausted and the Greek alphabet was used to name following up storms. And the first time that happened was back in 2005 with that historic record-breaking activity during that season. You may remember Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Rita, Wilma, and then some of the activity that kind of fizzled from November into December. And there was actually one instance of a tropical cyclone going from one calendar year into the other, and that is a rare occurrence, but it's not impossible to say the least. But more on that later in the live update. Going down the list again, this is the second time the name list has been exhausted and the Greek alphabet's been used, and this is the first time since 1971 that 5 tropical cyclones were simultaneously active in the tropical Atlantic, and I believe that was Hurricane Teddy, there was Beta, Alpha, Vicky, and Wilford all active at the same time in the Atlantic. I believe Sally was another one as well. So I may be missing or swapping the name. So we'll take a look at that in a little bit. There also have been 3 Atlantic named storms formed on the same calendar day. That was back a few days ago, September 18th. And the only time of this happening was back on August 15th 1893. So this is the second time to occur in recorded history that we've seen 3 Atlantic named storms acquire their names in one calendar day. There have also been 9 named storm landfalls this year, and Beta is soon to make landfall, so that is going to make it the 9th named storm landfall this year. So right now we're at 8 technically, but Beta is forecasted to make landfall over the eastern coast of Texas later on tonight going into tomorrow. So that's going to make it 9 total named storm landfalls for this year. And this is the first time in history that 7 tropical cyclones have made landfall over the U.S. In the duration of the beginning of the season up until before September. And we are also tied for the most tropical cyclones to make landfall over the U.S. It will be forecasted 9 storms, as I said earlier, with the 1916 Atlantic hurricane season. So we've not only broken a slew of records, we're forecasted to break more with the tropical storm Beta that's currently in the Gulf of Mexico. And a key thing to note is this is the second most active season so far, and that may actually become the most active hurricane season, more active than the 2005 hurricane season was. I'll talk about that more later on with the forecast for the rest of the season going forward. So this is just a recap of all the records we have broken so far this year, and we'll talk a little more in depth for each storm in just a bit. So by the numbers, we've had 24 total tropical depressions, 23 total named storms. We had that tropical depression 10 earlier in the beginning of August and wasn't technically classified as a tropical storm, so it remained tropical depression 10. We've also had 8 hurricanes from those named storms and 2 major hurricanes as well from those 8 hurricanes that I just mentioned. And as I said before, numerous historical records have been broken, and we are forecasted to break even more with the latest tropical storm Beta, Hurricane Teddy that's currently in the western Atlantic due to make landfall over Nova Scotia and impact parts of Atlantic Canada going into the latter part of the week. And so far, we've had an accumulated cyclone energy of 98 units as of today around 21 Zulu time. And so 98 may not sound like a lot in the grand scheme of things, but we've really picked up in terms of cyclone energy just for the month of September. And I believe we are approaching the highest amount of accumulated cyclone energy for any September in recorded history. So I will make sure to fact check that and probably post that at a later point just to verify that is actually the case. So now to give a storm-by-storm breakdown of what's happened between the last update and now, we're going to talk about all of the tropical storms and hurricanes we've seen so far. And that starts us off with Tropical Storm Josephine, formed in the middle of August and became the record earliest 10th named storm, surpassing 2005's Tropical Storm Jose. And you're going to see a lot of named records being broken from the 2005 Atlantic hurricane season. So make sure to note that as we go through all of these storms. We also had Tropical Storm Kyle just form a few days after Josephine. So we had Kyle and Josephine in the Atlantic at the same time at one point. Kyle was a weak-lived tropical storm, but it was the record earliest 11th named storm, surpassing 2005's Hurricane Katrina, and that formed right off the coast of North Carolina and pretty much went eastward from there. And then from there, we had Hurricane Laura form on August 20th and kind of dissipated around the 29th of August. It became the record earliest 12th named storm, surpassing Hurricane Luis from 2005. And here's some other interesting things from Hurricane Laura. It tied the 1856 last island hurricane for the strongest landfalling hurricane on record for the state of Louisiana since 1851. So the start of reliable hurricane records for the United States. And it made landfall with sustained winds of 150 miles an hour and a center pressure of 938 millibars. So it was 5 miles an hour short for being declared a Category 5 hurricane. So we're talking about a strong Category 4 hurricane as it was making landfall over southern Louisiana. And it is also the 10th strongest U.S. hurricane to ever make landfall by wind speed on record since 1851. And as of doing this live update, Laura is the strongest and costliest hurricane of the 2020 Atlantic hurricane season so far. We also have to consider Hurricane Sally that dropped a tremendous amount of rainfall on Pensacola, Florida, southern Louisiana, and parts of Alabama and the Panhandle as well. So this is taking into account the preliminary totals from Hurricane Sandy of all of the tropical storms we've seen so far in this season. But as of right now, Hurricane Laura is the strongest and costliest hurricane so far this season. And not much more needs to be said about that, just because of the incredible devastation that happened down in Louisiana and parts of Texas and Alabama as well. Moving on with the rest of the named storms we've seen so far. Hurricane Marco, funny fact, this and Hurricane Laura were supposed to impact the Gulf Coast at the same time, but due to changes in the forecast, we saw Hurricane Marco kind of swing later in its track than forecast, and then Laura kind of got hung up over parts of the Cuban Peninsula, the Cuban island, and then parts of Hispaniola as well. But other than that, Hurricane Marco formed later on in August and became the 13th earliest named storm, surpassing actually two records: Hurricane Maria, from 2005, and Tropical Storm Lee from 2011. So it broke not only one but two named storm records for the 13th named storm for Hurricane Marco. And then moving further down the line, Hurricane Nana, another short-lived hurricane, but it became a hurricane nonetheless just before making landfall over parts of southern Mexico, and then it actually made landfall over Belize, the country of Belize to be specific. But other than that, it became the record earliest 14th named storm, surpassing Hurricane Nate from 2005, and it was the first hurricane to make landfall over Belize since Hurricane Earl in 2016. So we saw a little bit of history with Hurricane Nana as it was making landfall over the country of Belize and then affecting parts of Central America. And then another little bit of tidbit of information: the remnants of Nana actually formed Tropical Storm Julio in the Eastern Pacific just a few days later as it crossed over Central America into the Eastern Pacific Basin. So that's just a little fun fact that I wanted to include in there about Hurricane Nana. Now, going back to the trend of very quick forming low-strength storms, we have Tropical Storm Omar that formed on the last day of August and became the record earliest 15th named storm in history, surpassing Hurricane Ophelia from 2005. And also we have Hurricane Paulette. This actually broke the trend of very quick forming weak tropical storms in the Atlantic basin. This formed more so towards the beginning of September, or should I say the middle of September, on September 7th. And it's actually possibly ongoing situation right now, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But it became the record earliest 16th named storm, surpassing Hurricane Philippe from 2005. And just before it strengthened into a Category 2, which was at its peak intensity, it slammed the Bermuda Island pretty hard. It actually made a direct landfall as we looked at our radar from, I believe it was the 14th as it was making landfall. So it really started picking up strength after it made landfall over Bermuda. And as I said, this is a possibly ongoing situation because as of now, Hurricane Paulette, as a post-tropical system, as of September 16th, has been kind of lingering around in the northern Atlantic and has been turning to the south. And we're possibly looking at that becoming, re-intensifying and reacquiring its tropical or subtropical characteristics. And the National Hurricane Center, as of the latest advisory, has it 90% chance of developing or redeveloping back into a tropical storm of some sorts. So we're going to have to come back to Hurricane Paulette in the next couple of days and see if it does reacquire its tropical characteristics. Going further down the line, we see more of a trend again with the very quick weak tropical storms being formed in the Atlantic. This one actually kind of stuck around for a little bit longer, almost about a week. Tropical Storm Rene formed on September 7th, back when Hurricane Paulette also formed as well. So two named storms on the 7th that have formed and gained a name from the name list. It is also the record earliest 17th name in history, surpassing Hurricane Rita from 2005, and continuing with that trend of the increasing trend of longer-lived cyclones that we've been seeing as of late. Hurricane Sally, as of recently, made landfall over the Florida Panhandle and also affected parts of the southeast as well. It became the record earliest 18th named storm, surpassing 2005's Hurricane Stan. And actually, fun fact, it made landfall on the same area and on the same day as Hurricane Ivan in 2004. And you can see that with these side-by-side pictures. So to the left, we have Hurricane Sandy from a few days ago, and then to the right, we have Hurricane Ivan from a few days ago, 16 years ago, actually. So both of these tropical cyclones made landfall over the same location on the same day, 16 years apart. So that is actually a rare, if I would say, a rare occurrence of a tropical cyclone making landfall on the same date as another tropical cyclone in the past. So a very interesting piece of history right here as we look back at the 2004 Atlantic hurricane season. So now moving into more current storms, we have Hurricane Teddy. That's still an ongoing tropical cyclone in the Atlantic. It's the record earliest 19th named storm, surpassing the 2005 Azores subtropical storm. And a little bit of tidbit information about the Azores subtropical storm. It was not actually found until the National Hurricane Center did its annual reanalysis of the past year's hurricane season. So back in 2006, when they were looking at the 2005 Atlantic hurricane season, they actually found this subtropical storm in the Atlantic that was pretty much unnoticed in eastern Atlantic towards the Azores Islands. So it just kind of got the name Azores subtropical storm, since it really didn't gain any strength to declare it a tropical storm or a hurricane at that. So that's that little fun fact. That's why it's called the Azores subtropical storm. But more on right now with Hurricane Teddy. As of the latest advisory from the National Hurricane Center, Hurricane Teddy is still a tropical a Category 1 hurricane, forecasted to impact Nova Scotia and parts of Atlantic Canada going into Wednesday afternoon. And from there, it's going to begin its process to transferring into a extratropical cyclone or post-tropical cyclone as soon as it makes landfall, and then starts heading northeast towards Newfoundland, and then eventually towards the northern Atlantic, where it'll eventually weaken from there. But this isn't the place to talk about the forecast for Hurricane Teddy. We're talking about the hurricane season as a whole. So with Teddy, I'll make sure to bring updates as new information comes out on that storm. Continuing with the line of storms we've seen so far, Tropical Storm Vicky was another quick tropical cyclone to form in the Atlantic on September 14th, and it became the record earliest 20th named storm, surpassing 2005's Tropical Storm Tammy. So we see a little bit of a trend of very quick forming tropical storms in the Atlantic. I'll talk more about why that's happening with the forecast and the outlook for the rest of the season. As we look at other tropical cyclones, there's also Tropical Storm Wilfred that formed a little bit later than Vicky and became the record earliest 21st named storm, surpassing 2005's Hurricane Vince, and it is the second time a W-named storm was formed in the Atlantic, joining 2005's Hurricane Wilma, since records began keeping track in 1950. Since naming started in 1950. Even though records go back to 1851, most of those tropical cyclones from 1851 to 1950 did not actually have names. They were just classified as the Great Atlantic Hurricane or some other forms of naming at the time. So we didn't really have a naming scheme up until 1950, and that's when we acquired all of these names that we're using up right now. So with that said, we recently had Subtropical Storm Alpha as well. And this is the second time the name Alpha from the Greek alphabet was used in history. Again, going back to 2005 when they went over their naming list. It formed a few days ago, and it became the record earliest 22nd named storm, surpassing 2005's Hurricane Wilma. And a little bit of an interesting thing with Subtropical Storm Alpha, it had a very unusual formation, as there was a tropical or subtropical cyclone within an extratropical cyclone. And while that is rare, it's not impossible for that to occur. A famous example of this actually happening was the 1991 perfect storm, where remnants of a hurricane in the Atlantic, I believe it was Olivia at the time, formed together with an extratropical system in the northern Atlantic, and they pretty much integrated within themselves and became a little bit something stronger, more of their products. But more on Subtropical Storm Alpha. This was a pretty historical storm, actually, as it was the first recorded tropical cyclone or subtropical cyclone to make landfall over the mainland Portugal, and also became the easternmost forming tropical or subtropical cyclone on record in the Atlantic, overtaking 1973's Tropical Storm Christine. So it was a very eastward forming storm. You really don't see tropical cyclones form that east just due to the unfavorable conditions that are there and not that much time to utilize warm sea surface temperatures and favorable conditions overall. More on the storm Alpha. It was actually the third confirmed tropical or subtropical cyclone to make landfall in mainland Europe in recorded history, and that is following a hurricane in Spain in 1842 and a Hurricane Vince as a tropical depression actually in 2005. So we're talking about the third confirmed subtropical cyclone to make landfall over mainland Europe in recorded history. So that's pretty cool to take a look at. And then also another little bit of tidbit of information, Subtropical Storm Alpha, and then also another hurricane-like system, Medicane Llanos, which is actually, Medicane is short for Mediterranean hurricane, made landfall on the same day in Europe, and this is the only occurrence of subtropical cyclones affecting Europe simultaneously. And we'll take a look at a picture real quick of Alpha and Llanos. So we have Subtropical Storm Alpha affecting Portugal to the left, and then to the right we have Medicane Llanos affecting parts of Greece and Italy and other parts of the Mediterranean as well. And why this is such a big deal is because Mediterranean hurricanes are a rare occurrence, since there's a lot of dry conditions over the Mediterranean Sea, so there's not really many favorable conditions for hurricanes or tropical storm like cyclones to form over the Mediterranean Sea. Nonetheless, this has happened in the past before, but to see two subtropical or tropical systems impact the European continent at the same time, it's a little bit of a historical event in the making that we've seen this year. And then also going back to talking about Alpha being the most eastward forming tropical cyclone in history, you could see just how far to the east that really formed. It really almost formed off the coast of Portugal as it was making landfall. And you could see with these boxes, these are the number of storms that have formed in each of these boxes. So you see a lot of formation happening towards the North Carolina coast, parts of off the Delmarva coast, and then also you have some formation in other parts of the western Atlantic mainly as well. But to see a tropical cyclone form that far out east is a little bit interesting, to say the least. So moving on to another ongoing system right now, Tropical Storm Beta formed a few days ago in the Gulf of Mexico and became the record earliest 23rd named storm, surpassing 2005's Tropical Storm Alpha and by 34 days. So by this point, we have started going into the Greek alphabet almost a month before the 2005 hurricane season started using the Greek alphabet back then. So we're on a very historic pace here in for this Atlantic hurricane season so far. And we'll talk about what we'll be seeing for the next few months of the remainder of the hurricane season. But going back to Tropical Storm Beta, it's currently forecasted to impact parts of the Arkansas, Louisiana, Texas area, and then also parts of the lower Mississippi Valley. And as it starts to weaken over land, it could also affect parts of the southeast going forward into this weekend, actually. So we're going to be probably seeing a lot of rainfall for the Texan and Louisiana coast, and then also a little bit of rainfall for other parts of the southeast as well. So that's the breakdown of what we've seen so far this season. Now it's time to talk about what we're going to be taking a look at for the rest of the season onward. This is not much different from the last few updates that I've been doing. We're looking at pretty much the same things for the outlook of the hurricane season, a few key things. So for the long term, we're looking at the El Nino Southern Oscillation. That's a big thing, actually, we're going to talk about in a little bit. We're also going to look at trade winds that are also affected by the ENSO, sea surface temperatures, the AMO, or the Atlantic Multi-Decadal Oscillation. I'm not going to really talk about that much because we're 2 months from the official end of the season, and at this point it's not really playing a big factor in terms of the next 2 months going forward. Our big thing is going to be the El Nino Southern Oscillation. And then for the short term, things to look at are Saharan dust and moisture. Even though Saharan dust is not a big thing to look for this time of the year, it's definitely a possibility. We did see a lot of Saharan dust towards the beginning and middle parts of the season, so I would not be surprised if we see some sort of hindrance in development. I'm not sure why that happened. But anyways, other things to look at are sea surface temperatures, upper level wind shear, and common areas of development and patterns of development over the tropical Atlantic. So from the last update I talked about the El Nino, La Nina, or the El Nino Southern Oscillation. And that's basically a climate pattern, a very erratic or irregular periodic climate pattern in the eastern Pacific that affects global climate patterns and weather for areas around the globe, and particularly for our area here in the U.S., especially for winter that's upcoming in the next few months. La Nina could give us more chance for snow actually in our part of the U.S. going forward. But that's for a discussion for another day. We're talking about the Atlantic hurricane season overall. So basically what the El Nino Southern Oscillation is, there are two phases that are involved with it. There's the La Nina phase that is more favorable for hurricane development in the Atlantic because it causes weaker vertical wind shear over the Atlantic and trade winds, and you also have less atmospheric stability, which is good for tropical cyclones and disturbed weather to kind of spark up in the eastern Atlantic and then other parts of the Atlantic as well. And then taking a look at the El Nino phase, that is the warm area of the warm phase of the ENSO oscillation, and that's basically not favorable for hurricane development in the Atlantic due to the inverse reasons. We have stronger vertical wind shear and trade winds in the Atlantic, and then also more atmospheric stability. So things are kind of locked in place and preventing tropical cyclones and disturbed weather to kind of flourish in the Atlantic overall. So the key takeaway for the ENSO is that the La Nina, or the cold phase, is more favorable for hurricanes, and you get more hurricanes and tropical cyclones in the Atlantic, and the El Nino, or the warm phase, is not good for hurricanes and tropical cyclones to form in the Atlantic, and therefore you get less hurricanes and tropical cyclones forming in the Atlantic during the hurricane season, or parts of the hurricane season. We've been talking about the possibility of La Nina coming in ever since we started doing outlooks for the start of the season, and now it's finally here. The Climate Prediction Center has issued a La Nina advisory, meaning that the ENSO is now in its La Nina phase going forward, and that's a very high probability that it's going to continue up until the end of the hurricane season, and also into parts of the winter, especially for next year as well. That's definitely a possibility going down the road. And what that means going forward is we're going to be seeing more tropical cyclone activity within the Atlantic for the last few months of the Atlantic hurricane season. It could also possibly prolong tropical cyclone formation into the off-season months, like the 2005 hurricane season did. We saw the La Nina kind of creep in towards the peak of the season and stay around for the latter parts of the year 2005, and then going into the winter of 2006 as well. And we also saw alpha, beta, gamma, and delta form within those off-season months. Actually, alpha, beta, and gamma kind of formed more towards the end of November, and then we also had actually a correction. Gamma and delta formed in the month of December, and delta actually continued into the next calendar year. So there's a possibility we could see that for the end of the Atlantic hurricane season for this year. Would I say we'd be seeing the same exact situation in 2005? It's unlikely to occur because of the dry air we've been seeing overall of the Atlantic and a little bit of abnormal wind shear, given the fact that it is a La Nina phase right now for the ENSO. So I wouldn't say this would go all the way into December, but there is a possibility that this could go into the end of November and possibly into December as well. But for the next 2 months of the official Atlantic hurricane season, we're going to be seeing definitely a ramp up in activity going forward. Not as much active as the last few weeks have been, but definitely a ramp up in activity, more so than usual. Another thing to look at is change in sea surface temperatures. And again, since we've started doing these updates on the outlook overall, there hasn't been much change to the forecast. We're still expecting above average sea surface temperatures for the rest of the season. So going forward, that's going to be meaning there's going to be a lot of fuel available for these tropical cyclones going forward. And that goes into our outlook, our predictions for the rest of the season overall. Looking at Colorado State University and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, that's a mouthful, so I usually like to say NOAA. So Colorado State and NOAA have not actually updated their outlook since the beginning of August, and they've stuck around their numbers of 24 named storms for Colorado State University, 12 hurricanes and 5 major hurricanes. And then also looking at NOAA's outlook or predictions for the season overall, 19 to 25 named storms. That would bring it very close to the 2005 official numbers, 7 to 11 hurricanes, and then 3 to 6 major hurricanes. So taking all of these factors that are coming into play, especially the La Nina, which in my opinion I've seen that coming since the start of the season. I'm gonna be upping my predictions going forward for the next 2 months, and then for the total number of named storms, hurricanes, and major hurricanes for this year's hurricane season. Just given the fact that we have La Nina coming into play now, there's also other factors like the Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation that is currently in a warm phase, above average sea surface temperatures, and then also the current trend of tropical cyclone formation that we've been seeing, these very quick tropical cyclones, and often in pairs or triplets as well, as we've seen a few days ago. So we're going to be upping our total named storm, hurricanes, and major hurricane forecasted numbers for this season overall. So we're looking at 28 to 30 named storms for the total of the season, 15 to 17 hurricanes, and 5 to 6 major hurricanes. So the only numbers I really changed were the number for named storms and hurricanes for the season as a whole. I haven't really been seeing that much promise for any major hurricanes to develop. We've only seen Hurricane Laura form, and then also possibly Hurricane Teddy become major hurricanes. So we're almost not even close to the forecasted number of major hurricanes so far, given the fact that we almost have 2 months of the season left, and much of the activity was supposed to happen a few weeks ago. So I'm not going to change the forecasted number for major hurricanes, but I will up the totals for named storms and hurricanes. And given this current outlook and this current prediction, we're looking at this year to be the most active season on record, beating the 2005 Atlantic hurricane season in terms of named storms and hurricanes for any year on record. So that's the change to the season's predictions. I'm going to make sure to post this up on all social medias and then also on the website as well at soaringweather.com. So that'll cover pretty much all of what I want to talk about going forward with the outlook of the season. I do want to include one last visual before I sign off eventually. Since we have burned through all of the names off of the list for this year's Tropical Cyclones names, you could actually kind of see we've already spent some of the Greek alphabet as well that I had included from the last update. So going forward, what I'm going to be doing is including another visual for the not only the tropical cyclone names, but also the Greek alphabet as well. So I'm going to be using this visual for tropical cyclone names and then also the Greek alphabet as well. And I'll make sure to black out and cross all of the names that have been used up and are not currently active at the moment. So you see Teddy into the far left in bold, underlined, and white. And then also Beta in the bigger scheme of the Greek alphabet box, still bolded and underlined since it's still an active system. And I also included another note with the name Zeta, since it is the furthest in the Greek alphabet any season has gone in terms of naming tropical cyclones. And that was back from the 2005 Atlantic hurricane season. And that was the only season to have used the Greek alphabet in recorded history. But given what I'm looking at for the rest of the season, we're going to definitely surpass Zeta, Eta, and possibly going to the middle of the Greek alphabet. So we're talking about Theta, Iota, Kappa, Lambda, and so on and so forth. I don't think we're going to get all through the Greek alphabet this year. That's just a crazy aspect to imagine. But I do want to include that since that is the next naming scheme we're going to be using for naming storms in the Atlantic going forward for this season. So that'll conclude tonight's live update of the tropics and the mid-September outlook. Make sure to look for this on not only soaringweather.com, but also the Soaring Weather YouTube channel as well. It'll also remain on Facebook for everyone to see. I'll make sure to share that as well. And then also going forward, you're definitely going to want to start, if you have not already, I would hope you have already done so, start making plans and prepping for the possibility of a tropical cyclone affecting your area. So make sure to brush up on your emergency hurricane plans. Make sure you have all the necessary tools and supplies that you need for the rest of the season. I'm not trying to fearmonger. I'm just trying to make sure everyone that is prepared, especially in the hurricane, tropical storm prone areas along the Gulf Coast, and then definitely the coastal regions of the eastern U.S. as well. So again, that'll wrap it up for tonight. Make sure to watch this on YouTube, share with all of your friends, like, comment, and I will hopefully see you all for the next live update that I do. Again, I will keep you all updated on Hurricane Beta and Tropical Storm Beta and Hurricane Teddy as they're making landfall over their respective areas. So take care, good night everyone, and be safe.